And now, Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O God, our strength and our Redeemer. And all of God's people said, Amen. The country western singer Alan Jackson sings the song, "Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning," on that September day. No doubt we will all remember where we were. I was at National City Christian Church in Washington, D.C., just leaving breakfast with Reverend Monty Hillis, who's here this morning, and thinking as I drove to my office how beautiful and blue the skies were. Not a cloud anywhere to be found. But as I made my way into the office on Thomas Circle and saw everyone in the building gathered around small television set and watching in disbelief the horrific tragedy unfolding here in New York City, and minutes later hearing that there was at least one other plane headed in our direction. And soon we saw the smoke rising from the Pentagon, and the blue skies were no more. The largest violent attack on American soil, and nearly 3,000 people lost their lives 15 years ago today. And family and friends and the faithful gather even now to remember those lost on 9/11, 15 years ago today. And we gather also in this place at 85th and Park Avenue. But we gather not only to remember a violent terrorist attack that destroyed and decimated life, but as Dr. Sturm reminded us in our prayer, we have come to remember and reclaim a vision that reorders, redeems, and resurrects life. We come not forgetting the violence all around us, but our focus is primarily and clearly on the vision before us. 15 years ago today, the largest violent terrorist attack on American soil. And 10 years ago today, a little band of disciples, pastor and people gathered in this very place, and committed ourselves to pursuing a vision for ourselves and for our city, nation, and world, believing that the vision is always bigger and always triumphs over the violence. And so my task was really made easy this morning, for I'd been asking and tugging at the coattails of the eternal God, asking God, what would you have me say to your people on this, our last Sunday together? And the word I kept getting was about vision. And I turned to the prophet Habakkuk, and there it was. You know, sometimes it seems like the ancient scriptures were written just yesterday for our context and directly addressed to us. So it is with this beautiful poetry from the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk lived in the decade just before the destruction of Jerusalem, when everything was coming loose at the seams, falling apart. And this is how the prophet described his situation. "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are ever before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous and judgment comes forth perverted. Can you hear it? Can you see it? Violence, wrongdoing, trouble, terror, destruction, strife, contention, the wicked surrounding the righteous, justice never prevailing. Daily headlines. It was a time and a society in which people were devoured and destroyed and beaten down by anxiety and fear. Institutions were failing. People took matters into their own hands, turned against their neighbors. The prophet poet said over and over again that violence is everywhere. Everywhere you turn, there is violence. And is not that a description of our times? We could use the same words that Habakkuk used about the destruction of ancient Jerusalem to describe our world today. So much anger and rage and fear and distrust, so much anxiety, so much of a thirst for vengeance. So we want to have more guns. And we want to kill all of the terrorists with drone strikes. And we're consumed with violence. Violence here, violence there, violence everywhere. Violence toward women. Violence toward immigrants. Violence toward gay people. Violence toward the other. Violence toward the poor. Violence toward children. Violence against people of color, often by the state, perpetrated by the government on our behalf. Violence on the battlefields of war and even in our city streets have become battlegrounds of violence. Violence in the name of religion and God. Violence even in the sanctity of our homes with our families. Everywhere you turn, there is violence. So what do? Hunker down, circle the wagons, build that wall, put up the arsenal, privatize and withdraw from the public, private schools, private security systems, private health plans, private civic societies, retreat and withdraw. Stop sharing, stop risking, stop reaching, stop serving, stop exposing ourselves, stop giving of ourselves, stop listening, stop trying, stop dreaming, stop believing. Is that what we do? Habakkuk the prophet said, no, don't stop. Start something new. Stand up and speak out. Listen, Habakkuk offers an alternative to meeting violence with violence. Habakkuk said, this is what I will do. I will stand at my watch post. I'm going to get up high so that I can see. I'm going to station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what God will say to me and what God will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. Put it up big and bold, a big banner out on Park Avenue so that folks going fast down the avenue can see it as they pass by. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Violence is real, but there is still a vision. And it is in the business of the prophet to see and offer a vision, to imagine a scenario of a coming future that is willed by God. It is at the urging of the prophet that the vision be grounded in faith is enough to override and defeat violence. Imagine vision versus violence, and vision wins every time. It is a daring calculation because in our anxiety and in our fear, we are mostly not available for such a vision. But biblical faith is always in the business of vision, believing that a common future with God will prevail over danger, death, and destruction of the present. So the church's business is to watch for the vision, to wait for the vision, to receive the vision, knowing that it will not tarry, it will surely come. In faith, we know about the vision that embodies God's own purpose for the world. Since the Exodus event, we've had this vision of emancipation from every form of exploitation and enslavement. Since the poetry of the ancient prophets, we've had a vision of disarmament, of beating swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, and studying war no more. Since the giving of the Torah, we've had a vision of mercy and generosity toward the vulnerable and toward widows and orphans and immigrants. Since the prophecy of Jeremiah, we've had a vision of a new covenant with God and a readiness for obedience to the Torah. Since the prophecy of Ezekiel, we've had a vision of a new temple when God dwells in our very midst. Since the days of Amos, we've had a vision of a time when justice would roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Since Isaiah, we've had a vision of a holy city, a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God. And since Jesus, we've seen the vision become a reality. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news preached to them. And even in our own times, since Martin and Malcolm and Mandela and Maya and St. Mother Teresa, we've had a dream and a vision. Yes, that's right. It's all the same, a dream and a vision of welcome practice of justice and mercy that includes black, white, brown, yellow, and red. We all precious in God's sight. A dream and a vision that includes women and men, young and old, gay and straight, Christian, Jew and Muslim, citizen and immigrant, in a world where God's got us all in God's hands. Hallelujah. It's always a contest. It's always a contest between violence and vision. In the eyes of a frightened world, violence will always veto vision because our anxiety will not let us look beyond the present moment. But faith in the eternal God in our midst is a refusal to succumb, to give in to, or to participate in such anxiety. Faith is confidence that the vision will prevail. Watch and wait for it. Watch and wait for it. Watch and write it down. Make it plain for everybody to see it. Watch, wait, and work for it. It will surely come. It is a vision that will not be denied. And that's, my friends, the word I leave with you on this day. God has given you a vision, and it is a vision that will not be denied. It was a vision that called this church into being. 206 years ago, 9 people from the Ebenezer Baptist Church around a kitchen table in Lower Manhattan dared to leave a church they loved, but they thought was too narrow and too restrictive, too much emphasis on creeds and doctrine and dogma, and around a kitchen table and food and Bible study and prayer and Holy Communion, they shared their thoughts and questions about the true nature of the church, and they felt the pull and tug of the Spirit to get back to the basics, back to a simple New Testament church with an emphasis on unity and the words of Jesus. So they said, we have no creed but Christ. We have no gospel but to love. And we have no purpose but to serve. For 206 years, in 10 different locations around the island of Manhattan, and for 71 years here at 1010 Park Avenue in a building erected 100 years ago by the Dutch Reformed Church. That vision, with no creed but Christ, no gospel but to love, and no purpose but to serve, has informed your work and ministry. Over the years, you've gone back to the vision, you've revised it, you've improvised on it. Just a few years ago, you said with a 2010 and a 2020 vision, not only are we going to preach Christ and the gospel of love and serve, but we're going to dare to be a church that embodies and embraces the divinity and dignity of difference. And so here we are in this big, bustling, bold, busy, beautiful, bodacious city called New York. And this city is crying out for big, bold, bustling, beautiful, bodacious love of God. And we're going to share it with everybody. No matter who you are, no matter where they come from, no matter who they love, they are all children of God. And our differences are not deficits or deficiencies, but our differences just make up the difference and add to the rich tapestry of God's creation. We are daring to be God's holy community, the beloved community of God. That's what you've said. That's what you've said God said to you. That's what you're striving for. That's what you're working for. That's what you're giving for. And you already know it. It's not easy. Oh, it's a struggle sometimes. It's not an easily achievable goal. It's counterculture. It's radical. It's revolutionary. It goes against the grain. Folks might call you crazy, that you don't have good sense. It gets messy sometimes. Folks get on your nerves up in here sometimes. But it's the kingdom of God. It's not achievable at all. It's really an impossible dream. All of the visions in the Bible are impossible dreams, which is to say we as humans cannot achieve them in and by ourselves. It can only be done through God's grace. But you got to see it. You got to keep looking for it, working on it, watching for it. I go to my seat with this. That's exactly what happened to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus in the gospel lesson knew all about violence. He worked for the IRS. He was a revenue man for the Roman Empire. He extorted his own people to impress the Romans for his own personal gain. He was an agent of violence for the empire. But Jesus offers Zacchaeus an alternate vision